Hi, and welcome back to Virtual Farmer in the Classroom. I'm Farmer Hannah, and this is the second video for our lesson about wheat. If you've not watched the first video about wheat, I suggest that you go and watch that first and then join me back here for part 2. In the first video, we talked about seeds, and we also discussed the life cycle of a wheat plant and where we grow it in Montana. So we talked about the whole process from planting a seed all the way to when the plant produces seeds that we could eat. In today's video, we're going to talk about how we eat wheat in our diet. So to get started, we're going to do a little activity. If you're at home or near your kitchen and with your family's permission, you could follow along with this if you have the right material. And if not, you can just watch. So for this activity, you are going to want to find wheat seeds. You might have them, you might not. They will look just like those pictures in the first lesson. These little guys here, they're super tiny. So you might have these, but if not, no worries. I'm sure you have something else that you could use instead. So if you don't have wheat seeds at home, you can use a couple grains of dried rice or some dried beans. So go ahead, pause the video, find those materials. You only need a few, and come on back. Now, what I want us to think about with these seeds is whether you would eat them like this. And we're just gonna use our fingers, feel them. What do you notice about these wheat seeds? I noticed that they're really, really hard. Do you think that we would eat something this hard without doing something to it first? I don't. Well, to eat wheat seeds, we need to change them from this really hard thing that wouldn't taste like very much. It might hurt our teeth and it wouldn't do much for our bodies. It wouldn't give us many nutrients. So we need to think about how we can get from these little hard, dry wheat seeds to something that we can eat. Now, we eat wheat in a couple different ways. The first way that we can eat wheat is to cook the dried seeds in boiling or simmering water until they absorb that water and get really nice and puffed up and really soft. So that's one way that you can eat them. It's not the most common, but it's sort of like cooking rice or dried beans. So just like if you have those dried rice or dried beans instead of dried wheat seeds, you can imagine the same thing would happen if you were to cook them in water. So that's one way to eat wheat. But the most common way that we eat wheat in our everyday diets is to change it into something else first. We turn it into flour. So you might be more familiar with flour. That's that generally white powder. You might use it in lots of different things in cooking. And to do that, thinking again about our really hard seeds, how do we make these really hard seeds into powder? Well, there's a couple different ways. Generally, we use something called a flour mill. A flour mill is a machine of some kind that turns these hard little seeds into a fine, fluffy powder. Now, people have been grinding wheat seeds into flour for a really, really long time, so that the first flour mills looked like these pictures on the screen, these stones, these really big stones. And you can see that they were pushed by animals, maybe a donkey or a horse or an ox or a cow. And the reason that you need a really strong animal to do that is because these stones are really heavy. And the reason you have really heavy stones is because, like we said, you need something really strong and hard to break down these really tough seeds, to break them into flour. So those methods were the original ways that people ground wheat into flour. But on a bigger scale and more modernly, what's happening right now all across Montana is people grind wheat into flours in these big machines like the picture on your right over here. So we use these big machines to grind a ton of wheat seeds into flour in a really quick amount of time. which is important because, like we said, Montana, we grow a lot of wheat here. With all those 9,000 different wheat farms in this state, there's got to be a much faster way to grind wheat into flour than by using donkeys or horses and stones, which, as you can see in this middle picture, that's not a lot of wheat seeds being ground at one time. That's much better for a really small scale, but not for a whole state worth of wheat. One other thing that you might be familiar with, you might even have at home, you could take a look at it. This is called a mortar and pestle. It's essentially 2 stones, and you grind the wheat seeds inside between the 2 hard stones, and you can make flour that way. It would take a really long time, and it is pretty hard work, but you can start at least to break up the seeds. It would take a long time to make it into flour, but here at least I've broken a seed open. So we don't usually use a mortar and pestle these days to grind our wheat into flour. What's a lot easier is just to get flour from the store. And like I said, you might recognize this. It's that fluffy whitish or off-white powder, and it's used in all kinds of things like bread, pasta, cereal, tortillas, cakes, cookies, pie, crusts, so many things. So we eat flour all the time in ways that we might not think of because it's changed from this seed form into flour into something totally different. So I think it's important for us to think about what has made these foods that we eat, because a loaf of bread didn't grow at the grocery store. It didn't grow on the grocery store shelf. It started as a wheat plant. The wheat was ground into flour. That flour was mixed with some other things. Generally, it could just be salt and yeast and water, and that's the simplest way to make bread. But you could also mix it with other things like eggs and butter and sugar, and that's how you start to get all of these different things made from flour. So I want you to take some time here and think about what you've eaten today, or maybe in the last week, or maybe what you'll be having for dinner, and think about how many of those foods had wheat in them. How many of those foods are made from flour, which is from wheat? And I think you'll be surprised to know that it's in a lot of our diet. We eat it all the time. Maybe you had cereal for breakfast. You could have eaten wheat then. Maybe you're gonna have a sandwich for lunch, and the sandwich is made with bread, which is made with wheat. And maybe for dinner, you'll have pasta, and that is probably made with wheat too. So it's really interesting to think about all the ways that we eat wheat every day. Thanks for joining me for this second part of our video about wheat. Make sure you finish filling out that Farmer in the Classroom worksheet. That was on page 4. You can find all the answers to those fill in the blank questions on this video or the first video. Now, next month, I will be telling you all about cows, which are another really important part of Montana's agriculture in particular. So I hope that you'll join me then. Thanks for sticking around for part 2 of our wheat video. See you soon.